Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Shri Shri Radha Madhava ki jai, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Can you take the echo? Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudhirayet. Hare Krishna, good morning. So we're reading today from the 4th canto, chapter 12. Dhruva Maharaj goes back to Godhead. Text 21. You can't remove the echo? On the board is 21. You think? Haribol, Haribol. Haribol, Haribol, Haribol. No, it's kind of like a sound setting, you know? Yeah? Haribol. Okay. Word by word first. Vijñāyam Tav Uttamagayam Kinkaro Abhyutitaham Sadvasam Vismritam Kramaha Nanama Namani Grinan Madhudvishaha Parshat Pradhano Iti Samhatanjalihi Vijñāyatav Uttamagaya Kinkaro Abhyutitah Svada Svavismrita Kramaham Nanama Nama Nigrinam Madhudvishaha Parshat Pradhano iti samhatanjalihi Vijñayatav utamagaya kinkaro Abhyutitah svadvasa vismita kramaham Nanama nikrinam madhudvishaham Parshat pradhano iti samhatanjali. Yes, please. Ladies. Avustita sadvasavismita kramam Nanama nigrinan madhudvishaha Parshat pradana iti samhatanjalihi. Anybody else? Word by word. Vijñaya. After understanding. To them. Utamagaya. Of Lord Vishnu. Of excellent renown. Kinkaro. Two servants. Stood up. Sadvasa. By being puzzled. Vismrita. Forgot. Kramaha. Proper behavior. Nanama. Offered obeisances. Namani. Names. Grinan. Chanting. Madhudvishaha. of the Lord, the enemy of Madhu. Parshat, associates. Pradhano, chief. Iti, thus. Samhata, respectfully joined. Anjali, with folded hands. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Dhruva Maharaj, seeing that these uncommon personalities were direct servants of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, immediately stood up, but being puzzled in hastiness, he forgot how to receive them in the proper way. Therefore, he simply offered obeisances with folded hands and chanted and glorified the holy names of the Lord. Purport. Chanting of the holy names of the Lord is perfect in every way. When Dhruva Maharaj saw the Vishnu Dutas, the direct associates of Lord Vishnu, four-handed and nicely decorated, he could understand who they were, but for the time being he was puzzled. But simply by chanting the holy name of the Lord, Hare Krishna Mahamantra, he could satisfy the uncommon guests who had all of a sudden arrived before him. The chanting of the holy name of the Lord is perfect, even though one does not know how to please Lord Vishnu or his associates. Simply by sincerely chanting the holy name of the Lord, everything becomes perfect. A devotee, therefore, either in danger or in happiness, constantly chants the Hare Krishna mantra. When he is in danger, he is immediately relieved. And when he is in a position to see Lord Vishnu or his associates directly, by chanting this Mahamantra, he can please the Lord. This is the absolute nature of the Mahamantra. Either in danger or in happiness, it can be chanted without limitation. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Gyanangyana Shalakaya Chakshurum Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swaparantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shriyuta Parakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragunatam Vitamtam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopipakanta Radhakanta Namostate Jayatam Surato Pangor Mamamanda Matergati Matsarvasva Padam Vajo Radhamadana Mohano Divyad Vrindaranya Kalpadrumada Srimad Ratangara Simhasanasto Srimad Radha Srila Govindadev Prashtalivi Savyamana Smarami Shri Mandra Sarasarambi Vamsiva Tatatastitaha Karsham Veno Svanar Gopir Gopinata Shri Estanaha Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhano Sutadevi Pranamami Hari Priye Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Once again the verse. Vinyayatu vutam magaya kinkaro abhyutita svadvasa vismrita kramaha Nanama nigrinam madudvishaha parshat pradhanau iti samhatanjalihi. Dhruva Maharaj, seeing that these uncommon personalities were direct servants of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, immediately stood up, but being puzzled in hastiness, he forgot how to receive them in the proper way. Therefore, he simply offered obeisances with folded hands and chanted and glorified the holy names of the Lord. So this is a very nice purport and verse. Maybe those who have studied the fourth canto, it's actually also a little bit famous maybe. Because Srila Prabhupada emphasizes in this purport that the Hare Krishna mantra is always fitting. Yeah? So if you're not sure, just chant Hare Krishna. And that's what we also do when we welcome somebody or when we say goodbye to somebody, especially some guests of honor. We certainly make sure to chant the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. And in association of devotees, instead of a moment of awkwardness, because there's always awkwardness when you're saying the first time, receiving somebody or maybe saying goodbye to somebody, there might be some awkwardness there. You don't know what to say or how to exactly say it or what would be proper or what not proper. That can always be there. And I remember one time, some time ago, when we were brahmacharis in Berlin, we had this small temple in Berlin, and Satyananda Maharaj came on a surprise visit, and we were in the middle of doing all kinds of things. But we immediately knew what to do. So he entered the door, we all came out of our different small areas we had there, and then we started chanting Hare Krishna. And it was a very jubilant situation. I still remember it very vividly. It was spontaneous, it was natural, but this is the point that Srila Prabhupada is making here. Either in danger or in happiness, the mantra can be chanted without limitation, and it makes any situation, elevates any situation to a spiritual platform, and it's perfect. So, this is very valuable and also very practical, because all kind of social norms, in one sense, are dissolved into the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra. Sankirtan, if we perform Sankirtan together, then that's the ultimate, you could say, mutual occupation. So Sankirtan, of course, means that it's performed in congregation, many people together, but also the syllable san implies that it's perfect. It is completed, it is perfect, and whatever might be lacking or missing or not be perfect becomes purified and perfected by the chanting of the holy name. And Dhruva Maharaj here, we have heard in the previous verses how after receiving the boons of the Lord, of ruling the planet for 27,000 years, he then went onward to a big campaign against the Yakshas, which was a very interesting episode. But finally, he retired from his duties as a king, and he retired to the Himalayas, to Badarik Ashram. Badarik Ashram is, you could say in one sense, the equivalent of Shambhala. Somebody heard about Shambhala? No? It's the secret kingdom in the Himalaya. Somewhere hidden. In Buddhist traditions, Shambhala is very famous. And many people talk about Shambhala. But for us, it's Badarik Ashram. So Badarik Ashram is this place in the Himalayas, which is not directly accessible for normal mortals. But with some qualification and maybe with the right invitation, you might be able to access Badarik Ashram. And if you go nowadays to India, there is you go the Ganges, to follow the Ganges to Haridwar, then to Rishikesh, then to Devprayag, Rudraprayag, and then Yoshimat. Then you can reach Badrinath, and then near Badrinath, Badarik Ashram is supposed to be, and there's also the famous Vyasadhara waterfalls and caves. But I was there and I didn't see Vyasadeva. So it's because we have no direct access. But even it's a very amazing, very very unique place. You need to have the right qualification, and then you can enter Badarik Ashram, because in Badarik Ashram there is an assembly of so many rishis and sages, including Vyasadeva. He's constantly present in Badarik Ashram. And Badarik Ashram, even it's in the middle of the Himalayas, it's supposed to always be lush and green, verdant, very suitable for meditation. And because in Badrinath in the winter it snows a lot. So in Badrinath it's a very amazing place of Lord Vishnu, and it's similar like many of the other dhams. Any activity you perform there is considered to be multiplied by 1,000. And it's actually the place where Lakshmi Devi took the form of a Badri berry tree to protect the Lord in his meditation. So therefore Badri Narayana is there. And Naranarayana Rishis also were there meditating. So these are the two main deities or personalities worshipped there. And in the winter, this deity of Badrinarayan is brought down to Yoshimat. So Yoshimat is maybe around 1,800 meters above sea level, and Bararik Ashram is above Badrinath is about 3,000 meters above sea level. So in the winter it snows so much that it's not possible for normal human beings to survive there. It's around 6 meters of snow, So it's like a lot of snow. So they bring the deities and the pujaris, in the very soon probably, I don't know, October maybe, they go down and then they leave only, they leave some ingredients, and some of them, I think the big murti remains, they only take the Utsava murtis. And then in the springtime when they return, the ghee lamps are burning. This is the devatas, the demigods, the rishis, from Badarik Ashram. They come and they worship Badrinarayan in the winter. So it's a very mystical place, and this is the area which is described here where Dhruva Maharaj was also performing devotional service, austerity. He was worshipping the deity, he was taking baths in the clear waters. Very, very powerful to take bath in this. It says here also the fresh, cool, somewhere here, in the fresh, cool waters. If you take bath every day in such waters, you become purified, your mind becomes purified, because in the science of cleansing the body, gross and subtle, it's said that to cleanse the gross body, we of course use soap, maybe shampoo, or maybe some earth, and hot water is good to cleanse the gross body. But to cleanse the subtle body, cold water is very effective. So if you ever have a nightmare or can't get rid of some strange thoughts, jump into a cold lake, or take a cold shower. It really helps. So yogis perform that, of course, or in a combination with pranayama and worship of the deity. Dhruva Maharaj, it says here, completely purified his existence, and then contemplating on the Lord, he developed very deep emotional, devotional sentiments. And as soon as he had this very deep, was completely purified externally, and internally he was completely absorbed in devotion to the Lord, immediately the Vishnu Dutas appeared in their Vaikuntha Vimana, like the shining moon in the sky. They descended. The point I was trying to make is that Dhruva Maharaj was not only Dhruva Maharaj, but there's one of the instances in the Bhagavatam where the process of yoga, is explained in its, you could say, most sublime culmination. So it's a combination of being completely pure, in mind, have a calm mind. Most yogis are trying to pacify the mind, to have a very strong, powerful, determination, strong mind, strong physique also. So to endure, cold baths every day, you have to have some condition. Otherwise, you might get a cough. So he was a very strong personality, very determined. He was performing yoga and austerities at the same time. but he was also dedicated in deity worship. So he had an Arka Vigraha, a deity of the Lord, and using that deity, worshipping that deity, it says here, a perfect, what it says? A perfect, let's see if I find it. So he was practicing Ashtanga Yoga, and then okay, I don't find it, but it was saying that the Arka Vigraha was the perfect representation, the perfect replica. That was the word, the perfect replica of the Lord, and so this is the combination that actually one should strive to. It's a combination of vairagya and means the renunciation, but at the same time also activity. And this sometimes is confusing for people who practice spirituality, or because they think if they are active, then they're getting entangled, and if they want to be active in this world, they want to be active, to enjoy. And it seems like a contradiction, but aparigraha and vairagya, or like strong endeavor, dedication, also bhakti, devotion, and vairagya is actually the secret of yoga, of course. So, for example, when we cook, I think that's the most practical way to apply this principle. We are very active, very dedicated, to make a very nice offering, not for ourselves. At least that's what should be our meditation. Our senses might trick us, and when the nice smell comes, you might be like, oh. But if you have the right, presence of mind, you can redirect your thoughts immediately. But that's the practice, to be detached while we are active. That's the sublime, the perfection of yoga. Not just voidist negation and rejection, because that would be one of the interpretations or understanding. Liberation means negation, vairagya means rejection of everything material and external, to either create void, emptiness in the mind, and then you're peaceful. Finally there's nothing going on. Oh God, quiet. All the noise is over. But Jai Satchidananda Prabhu, some of you might surely know him. He's writing a few books, and one of the books he's working on is called The Noisy Monastery. So the Hare Krishna temple is a noisy monastery. So sometimes people think, a monastery or an ashram, very quiet, very peaceful. Om Shanti, want to meditate, please don't disturb me. But in a temple, there's always so many activities, and kirtan, and it's a noisy place, plates and pots are being banged, and midrangas and kartalas and loud exclamations of Haribol, and so it's the noisy monastery. Why? Because we don't want silence, actually. Silence is good to avoid prajalpa. Srila Prabhupada in Nectar of Instruction emphasizes this point very nicely. He says, of course it's good to be silent. If you're going to talk only nonsense, better shut up. But maybe do you have something valuable to say? So he makes this very clear categories. So prajalpa, just materialistic idle talk. Shishri Pala Lakshmana Singari Bhagavan Ki Jai. Idle talk is, of course, you can say the lowest stage. Better than idle talk is to be silent, to practice silence. And many people realize that, if I open my mouth, I'm going to say a lie or get entangled in something. I better say nothing. Or you realize, the more you talk, the more you get agitated as well. So people realize maybe we should stop, talking too much. And but better than silence, better than mauna vrata, it's the you could say vairagya you would do. And remember in Gurukul, whenever we became too loud, the teacher would, bang the blackboard and write in big letters, mauna. And when we knew, okay, now we push it too far. Now we have to be quiet. And then we, better than mauna is, of course, chanting Hare Krishna mantra or Krishna Katha, talking about the Lord, glorification of the Lord. All of that is much better than mauna. So I was maybe, 7 or something, or maybe 8, and I understood that already, at least theoretically. So when the teacher wrote mauna on the blackboard, I started screaming loudly the Mahamantra. But he didn't like it. It was not approved still, because it was not the right motivation, I guess. So the motivation also plays a role. With what motivation are we chanting? Are we chanting to please the Lord, Or in my case, I was just chanting to revolt, to have an excuse. Or Mayavadis chant, just because they want liberation. So the motivation is also very, very important. Externally, sometimes Mayavadis might have, beautiful temples, deities, they will do beautiful bhajans, but what is their motivation? So the motivation is also crucial. If the motivation is to please the Lord, then certainly chanting the names of the Lord is higher than mauna. And not only chanting, any talk, anything related to Krishna becomes spiritualized. And one example of that is Srila Prabhupada. There's a few examples, but 2 examples that come to my mind are, one was in, I think it was Sudama Prabhu, or maybe it was Sudama Maharaj at that point. In Vrindavan, he was helping building the Krishna Balaram Mandir. And he had to organize bricks and concrete and deal with all the workers and all the corruption and not being able to get any sand and having to bribe people to get any materials. And so it was very stressful. And so he went to Prabhupada and said, Prabhupada, I can't chant properly, whenever I sit down, I'm thinking of bricks, of concrete, of all these people, I can't, I think I should stop, And then Srila Prabhupada said that this is Krishna anxiety. So Krishna anxiety is good, Prabhupada said. And he then gave the example of Arjuna, in the middle of the battlefield, he was also, fulfilling his duty with Krishna, serving his duty as a kshatriya, shooting thousands of arrows, killing people, also quite stressful. So this is a little bit, maybe confusing, but it's true. So in a similar way, like chanting the holy name is better than mauna, any activity related to Krishna is better than inactivity, or immature Falgu Vairagya. Rupa Goswami calls it Falgu Vairagya, false renunciation. So what we want to do is Yukta Vairagya. So Yukta Vairagya means that everything that we have in talents and on wealth, on abilities, on maybe ideas also, if we link those with Krishna, they become truly, that is true renunciation. So renunciation is not to reject everything. Vairagya means to detach or reject. But to reject and detach from everything, literally, Rupa Goswami says that's Falgu Vairagya. It's false renunciation for the simple reason that it doesn't belong to you. So what are you detaching from? It doesn't belong to you anyways. It's not yours. You were an usurper in the first place already. So therefore, real Vairagya is Yukta Vairagya. That means that we connect it to the actual source to whom it truly belongs. Or in other words, we acknowledge to whom it belongs. And we use it in his service. If we do that, that is real renunciation. And that makes sense. If you take somebody from the Brahma Jyoti, we have a lost and found box, also known as Brahma Jyoti. You take something from it, and then you're like, I'm going to detach from this, So it's not detachment, Detachment is to find the owner and give it to him, something like that. So that's the idea, that the real vairagya is to be actively engaged in acknowledging who's the owner, actively pleasing him. Like in the Bhagavad Gita, that's considered to be the peace formula also. Bhaktaram yagyatapasam sarvaloka maheshwaram. So the Lord is the owner of all planets, and He also is the enjoyer, Bhaktaram yagya tapasam, of all sacrifices, all rituals, all austerity should be directed towards Him. He is the ultimate enjoyer. And if we acknowledge Him in that position, we will have a common center and avoid conflict. Because conflict evolves when we think we are the center. Of course, there is also spiritual conflict. The spiritual world, there is also spiritual conflict. And one very famous story is the story of Ramanujacharya, who first was in Kanchipuram, worshipping Varadaraj. So Varadaraj is a very, very beautiful, very tall deity, very huge deity of Lord Vishnu. And that's where Ramanujacharya was born, that's where he went to Gurukul. And he was serving that deity very dedicatedly. And at one point, more or less long story, it became clear that Ramanujacharya would be going to Srirangam and worship and dedicate his life to Ranganatha. And then Ranganath Swami and Varadaraj Swami had a fight over Ramanujacharya. They're like, no, Ramanujacharya should stay here. And the two deities, they could not decide, they could not settle, they could not come to a consensus agreement on, where Ramanujacharya should stay. So there might be conflict of interest like that in the spiritual world even, or in spiritual matters. But it's always transcendental is sweet, and there might be a very mystical solution as well. So in that case, at one point it was resolved and agreed and realized that Ramanujacharya could expand himself, as a perfected yogi, in two Ramanujas. So one Ramanuja stayed in Varadaraj, with Varadaraj in Kanchipuram, and the other one went to Srirangam. But in this case, still the center of attention was always the Lord, or the devotion, the bhakti between the Lord and the devotee. The problem is when we have a separate interest. So a separate interest, that's when it becomes problematic, because your separate interest is certainly at one point in conflict with somebody else's separate interest, and then there's conflicts, so many conflicts. Going back to Badarik Ashrama, this is something I regularly like to mention because it's interesting and good to know. Because Badarik Ashram is also the place where our Guru Parampara was, you could say, relinquished or confirmed again with Madhvacharya. So if you look at the Guru Parampara in the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, we have Krishna, then we have Brahma, then we have Narada Muni, then we have Vyasadev, and that we know, Krishna, Brahma emerges from his from the navel, of Vishnu, and then in his meditation he has a direct darshan of Krishna, Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami. So he sees the spiritual world and he receives the Gayatri mantras. And then one of the sons of Brahma, of course, is Narada. And Narada Muni is known to be the spiritual master of Vyasadeva. In the beginning of the Bhagavatam, we hear how Vyasadeva is confused and is meditating on how to pondering why he's confused, why he's not happy or content after compiling all the Vedas. And Narada Muni, as a spiritual master, comes and gives him direction. But then Vyasadev in the Guru Parampara, who's next in the line? Madhvacharya. So Vyasadev was living in the era of the Mahabharata, in Dwapara Yuga. And when was Madhvacharya living?
1,000 years ago.
Around 1,000 years, a little bit less, 800, something like that. So, how did it work? So, because Vyasadev, a long time ago, he wrote the Mahabharata, and he's one of the main protagonists in the Mahabharata. And so it seems like a huge gap, between Vyasadev and Madhvacharya. Karamakana Maharaj was once explaining there is a more detailed parampara listing also. That's also there. Because of course Vyasadev had disciples, and they had disciples, and they had disciples. And then Madhvacharya had also a spiritual master himself. But our Guru Parampara is not predominantly Diksha, it's actually predominantly Shiksha. It's a Shiksha Parampara. The true Shiksha, a Parampara, is established. Like for example, in the main Parampara we have on the altar, Srila Prabhupada is a Diksha disciple of Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj. But then Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj, he's still also the Diksha disciple of Gaur Kishoras Jagannadas Babaji, Gaur Kishoras Babaji. But then the next two are Shiksha, connections. So the connection between Madhvacharya and Vyasadev is also a Shiksha connection, and it is described in the lifetimes of Vyasadev, Madhvacharya, how Madhvacharya performed a few times long journeys throughout India, always towards the Himalayas, to different areas of the Himalayas, because the Himalayas were, of course, they're called Dev Bhumi traditionally, so the land of the gods, Dev Bhumi. But also because there are many areas in the Himalayas where ancient libraries were still preserved. In the mainland of India, most of the libraries were actually destroyed during many different invasions. So Nalanda or Takshashila or Odantapuri, many huge great universities, they were all burned and destroyed. So when acharyas wanted to get original manuscripts or texts, they went to the Himalayas to find them. In Sharda Peeth, for example, is nowadays in Pakistan, is a temple of Sarasvati, the goddess of learning. Many ancient texts were preserved there. And most of the acharyas went to Sharda Peeth or different places there. But on one excursion, after Madhvacharya had finished writing his commentary on the Bhagavad Gita, he went with his commentary to the Himalayas with his disciples. And it's very interesting because Madhvacharya, of course, is a unique personality. Who knows who he is? Hanuman and Vayu and Bhima. Yeah. So it says, in Treta Yuga it's Hanuman, in Dwapara Yuga is Bhima, and in Kali Yuga the same person is again born as Madhvacharya. And he's the son of Vayu, Vayuputra. So because one of the names of Hanuman is Pavan also, because he's the son of Vayu. So Madhvacharya is an incarnation of Bhima and Hanuman. Same person, different yuga. So that's also his, you could say, his style cannot be hidden. So Madhvacharya had he took sannyas, I think, when he was 9 or 12, I forgot exactly, but very young age. He took sannyas. He renounced, and he gathered, you could say, almost a gang of sannyasis around himself, who were all very, very strong. They were very strong, and one of their main occupations, free time occupations, was swimming and wrestling, and climbing, climbing mountains. That was their. Of course, they also studied Shastra, did everything, but in their free time, they were climbing mountains and wrestling, and they were very powerful, and they had no impediments traveling because they were very respected. I think at that time there was the Sultanate in Delhi was ruling, and generally it was dangerous to travel. But Madhvacharya with his sannyas disciples, they always had free pass. It's like, they're coming, okay. Sometimes they tried to stop them without success. So on one of these journeys, they went to the Himalayas. So you can imagine, Madhvacharya with all his sannyas disciples, basically running up the Himalayas. And then at one point, Madhvacharya started making bigger and bigger jumps, not just running, but jumping. So Hanuman was being manifested. And then suddenly he jumped from one, comb of the upper line of a mountain where they were running to another line, and then he jumped even further, until they couldn't see him anymore. So Madhvacharya left the group, and he went to Badarik Ashram. So Badarik Ashram, not accessible for anybody so easily, but Madhvacharya went to Badarik Ashram, and it is described that in Badarik Ashram, Vyasadeva is there, and he is very often absorbed in meditation, and different demigods and rishis, different personalities are always surrounding him or waiting in line for darshan, to get access to, get an audience with Vyasadeva. When Madhvacharya came, immediately Vedavyas, who was in meditation, everybody was waiting for a long time already. He opened his eyes and he could skip the line, So Madhvacharya was allowed to skip the line, and he got straight away darshan. And the reason why Madhvacharya wanted to meet Vyasadeva is to get an approval on his commentary. So that's a good idea, So if you're commenting on something, you might give it to the person who wrote the original text, So he gave his commentary to Vyasadeva, and Vyasadeva read the commentary and approved it, gave him blessings, and then that's how our parampara is linked to Vyasadeva. So Madhvacharya is supposed to have presented his commentary of the Gita to Vyasadeva in Badarik Ashram, and then he returned. So you need a little bit of faith, to believe that, But that's the narrative for sure. And if you hear about Madhvacharya, it becomes very plausible. It's a very unique personality, very, very powerful. Okay, so I think I'll stop here. Maybe there are some questions or comments. Somebody want to add something? Yes.
Thank you for the class. You mentioned just briefly that the problem starts when we have separate interests and self-centered usually, and because eventually they're going to clash then.
Yeah.
What about instead, like if you can comment on when we want to serve the Lord, but in different ways, and sometimes we may have same material resources, let's say, that we want to serve the Lord, and then we may get into clash.
Yes, so separate interests doesn't mean that we're not allowed to have individual interests. So of course we all have separate abilities and interests, how we can serve the Lord. And the commonality is that we both want to please the Lord, of course. And your question is then, still there might be a situation where the same resources, you only have one Seat, with 9 seats, and some devotees want to go on Harinam, and the other devotees want to buy Boga, with the same car, So there's a conflict there again, starting. And that's what I was saying, that there is spiritual conflict of interests, There is spiritual conflict, but because we have the same aim, it doesn't become deep-seated grudge for sure. And very often mystical solution might be possible, like in the case of Ramanujacharya. And very often also in devotional service, the more we are in tune, with Krishna, with Paramatma, we have the right inspiration to do the right thing at the right time. It works better. But even if, let's say, there's like two devotees fighting over the same car, for different services, ultimately it would not be, that you would, hate that person, because the person is still, the person is doing devotional service. What is the question? Yeah. Is it okay?
You told that Prabhupada said that the Krishna anxiety is okay, but I've heard from Sachinanda Swami that he said we should not make plans while chanting, also no Krishna conscious plans. And actually that's the same, or not? Can you maybe say something?
Very good question, yeah. So when we chant the Hare Krishna mantra, our focus should of course be to hear the mantra. To hear each syllable. As we hear each syllable, as we're chanting each syllable, we're hearing each syllable. And technically in our tradition, it's not also the idea to even meditate upon, try to artificially, as we chant, meditate upon Krishna Lila. There are some traditions where they do Lila Smaranam consciously, but in our tradition we actually focus purely on the holy name, on the sound vibration. We take shelter of Nam Prabhu, and then as we are purified and qualified, something might be more and more revealed, how we can serve Krishna directly. At the same time, we have a mind. And this mind is accustomed to repeat whatever it has experienced or seen or done sometime before. So that's why the movements of the mind in the Yoga Sutras are called vritti. So vrittis are circles. Everything is moving in circles. And some people move in very small circles, like you spend 2 days with them and okay, that's, they start looking in a certain way and what they're going to say, what story they're going to tell you, And some people, the circles are so big, it takes a long time for you to hear the same thing from that person. But in any case, our minds are always moving in circles, bigger or smaller circles. And we're trapped in those vrittis. And the whole process of yoga is to stop that movement. So yoga is chitta vritti nirodha. Whatever is happening in the mind, this movement of the mind, we're trying to stop it and redirect it. It's not recommended that, because sometimes I have also this experience, when I'm sitting down and chanting, I have the best ideas, So one very practical thing Bhakti Bhushan Maharaj recommends is to have a notebook with you, and I've done this very, very often. You chant, and some ideas, some thoughts, something comes, and you just write it down. You write it down, so we should not consciously indulge in talking or in thinking about something separately. At the same time, what in the case of Srila Prabhupada and Sudama is that the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra, of course, is a plea to be engaged in devotional service. We're pleading with Ladini Shakti, with Radharani, please engage us in devotional service. And that's another funny paradox sometimes, when somebody's chanting, then somebody comes, hey Prabhu, I need some help. No, don't disturb me, I'm chanting. But actually you were asking for service, and now somebody brought you service. and then you're rejecting the service. So you could also see it like that. But the point is that when you are so absorbed in Krishna anxiety, that means all your anxiety, you're so absorbed in this anxiety, how to please Krishna, how to do this for Krishna, that you can't think otherwise. Then that anxiety is also purifying. That anxiety is also purifying. It has a purifying effect, for sure. It's not mundane anxiety. If you have a mundane anxiety, you probably will become depressed and, get gray hairs overnight or something. But with Krishna anxiety, even you might also have externally some, implications. It has a benefit. So that's what Srila Prabhupada was emphasizing, that it's not in vain and it has a spiritual benefit as well. Doesn't mean that we should consciously try to, chant and think of all the things we have to do. That's not the idea. Okay? Yes.
Can you explain a little bit more about the Bhadarkar ashram? Like, how is it possible? Like, is it some kind of portal? Because, if Vyasadev is he still there? Like, but in another level? And like, how could Madhvacharya meet him even though the time is so different?
Yes, so we have Chitranjivans. So Chitranjivanas, I think there are 14. I don't know the whole list, but there's there are living entities that are not dying. They live until the end of the creation, sometimes until the end of a yuga also. So we have Ashvatthama, we have Hanuman, we have Vyasadev. They're all still here. Ashvatthama for sure. There is Ashvatthama. You know Ashvatthama? He did a big mistake. He tried to kill the Pandavas, but he killed the 5 sons of Draupadi, and then he was banned. So he's somewhere around, roaming, desperately. And they made now a movie on Ashvatthama in India, and everybody's writing the comments. Ashvatthama probably saw it already, or what do you think? What does Ashvatthama think about this movie? But he's still around for sure. And so in the same way, Vyasadev is still there, and this you could say with normal physics it might be difficult to explain. But I know many people who went to visit Kailash, which is also a very famous, holy site in the Himalayas. Kailash, Mount Kailash, and it's holy for us because we consider it to be the abode of Lord Shiva. And Tibetans also consider it holy. And you can make a parikrama, like we do Govardhan parikram, you can do Kailash parikram. But it's, a parikram, I don't forget exactly how high the highest altitude there is, but it's 4, 5, 6,000 meters above sea level. You're making parikram, and everybody who has been there tells me, you feel like you're entering a different dimension. Very supernatural, sensations, and people have very deep realizations. So the Himalaya is a very mystic place for sure. And if you ever wandered or walked in mountains, they are very extensive. I remember once in Peru we were walking. There's this very famous, also like a mystical place in Peru. It's called Marcahuasi, and you walk up, and you think you have reached the edge, and when you reach the edge, there's again a huge slope, and then you think you reach the edge, and then again a big slope, and it goes on and on and on and on. And then finally there's this big altiplano, like this big, flat area, and very mystic. All kinds of, formations are there that look like different animals, and there's a big rock, huge rock, looks like 10 faces of different people, and there's all kinds of stories the local people tell, what happened there, it is very, for me it's plausible that, and for sure it's not direct access, that's for sure. It is a different dimension, it is a different plane of existence, which we cannot access directly. But it is there. And one way it is explained, it is sometimes that when we study the cosmology in the 5th canto of the Bhagavatam, it's also very difficult to match the description you see there with what we physically can measure and observe surrounding us. But one explanation is that this is what the demigods can see. From their perspective, they can see all of that. but we have only limited access, you know. You could also say it's like big buildings, you know. Big, and this is very known also in New York, with elevators, and many floors are only restricted access, you know. Or maybe whenever, if you travel somewhere, you know, you go to a hotel and you get a card, you know, and your card only works for your floor, you know. You try to go some other floor, or you want to go to the rooftop, it doesn't work, you know. It becomes red, you know, no green light. And in New York, it's known that many buildings have, you know, restricted area, you know, floors, and only with the key, you know, the key, then you can press the button, and then you can exit, you know, on that floor. So in a similar way, there are restricted areas where we have no access, you know. When you speak of islands, it refers to planets, and oceans refer to the space, you know. So the different dvipas are planets, you know, in space. But the description is so much bigger, you know, so much bigger than our planet here. So restricted access, you know. And many years ago, I read one very interesting book. It was a Russian book translated into English or German, I don't know. And it was describing archaeologists who were researching in the North Pole many, many years ago, in the North Tundra in Russia. And they were, you know, traveling in the tundra. I don't know which season, but it was kind of a cold season. And then suddenly, somehow, it became warmer and warmer. You know? They had landed. They were stranded somehow with their plane. They had to walk. They were walking. They were lost. They were not sure where they were going. And eventually, the climate became like astonishingly warm. You know? And they were very confused. What's happening? You know, many days of walking. And then, because they were scientists, they started cooking water. And if you cook the water, you measure the temperature. You can know at what altitude you are, you know? Because water cooks in different altitudes at different temperatures, you know? And they usually, like if you go to the, you know, high in the mountains, the water will be boiling at, you know, 80, 90 degrees, you know? And usually around sea level, it boils at 100 degrees. But their water was not boiling up to 110, 120 degrees. So that means they were going somewhere into a, you know, below sea level, you know. So, very interesting book.